Hi everyone, this is by Isha Yumontukai. So today we are going to discuss the module 9 and the topic about is prejudice. So this will be the objectives of our topic. So we will illustrate the three components of attitude, and we will differentiate between stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. So we will define and describe stereotypes threats, and we will describe the various forms of prejudice and discrimination can take. And second to the last is we will define stigma and list and describe its forms. And the last one is we will clarify how stigma impacts people with mental illness. So those are the objectives of our topic, and I hope we all have your attention to listen in our report. So let's start.
A various forms of prejudice have influenced everything from Asian to religious persecution, to the slave trade, the oppression of women, homosexual, the elderly, and ethnic minorities. So what this is? Well, a prejudice is a premature judgment. This means when we decide about the person, place, or things before we or have the information. We do this because it helps us to have a general overview of the world. When we met somebody new, our subconscious mind makes a snap. Judgment, sorting the person into categories like gender, race, religion, sexuality, and age. We are judging whether someone is like us and belong to our group or like them, an out group. We do this because we are social animals and our identity came from the group we belong to or would like to belong to. But just because it's in our nature doesn't mean it's always right. One bad experience with a person from a particular group can cause a person to think of all the people from the group in the same way. This is called stereotyping. It can lead to prejudice, bias, and discrimination. And that in turn can lead to individuals or entire communities feeling vulnerable, frightened, or worthless, and to feeling inequality or insulation. Prejudice has sometimes led to speculation we may be entering a new era of intolerance, pushing people further apart. The civil rights leader Martin Luther King had it right when he defined equality as judging people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. So how do we kick a centuries-old pattern of thought? And what are the first steps to recognizing our own prejudices? And perhaps learning a new openness. So prejudice can be non-conscious and automatic. It is implicit and explicit attitude. Explicit is stated directly and fully or at the level of conscious awareness. So the question is, it is possible that we might not even be aware we hold such an attitude toward others people? The answer is yes, and it's called implicit attitude. It is implied, not expressed directly, but understood. So for instance, do you think that overweight people are unhealthy? Or do you think that Muslims are more violent than Christian? It is implicit assessment test. Most people were asked if they hold a racist attitude, but research using the implicit attitude test according to Greenwald et al. 1998. So these are the types of prejudice and discrimination. Number one is racism. Race discrimination involves treating someone unfavorable because he or she is not a certain race or because of personal characteristics associated with race such as hair texture, skin color, or certain facial features. Aversive racism Symbolic racism. Sa symbolic racism, meron siyang 4-component measure such as denial, continuing discrimination, work ethic and responsibility for outcome, excessive demands, and the last one is an underserved advantages. Yes, advantage. And the sexism, treating a person unfavorable because of their
Gender.
ageism, treating favorable because of their age. Weight discrimination, treating someone unfavorable because of their weight. And disability discrimination is treating someone unfavorable because of their disability.
Stigmatization. Stigmatization is overlapping with the prejudice and discrimination in terms of how people from other groups are treated in stigma, or when negative stereotyping, labeling, rejection, devaluation, and loss of status occur due to membership in a particular social group, such as being Hispanic, Jewish, or a Goth, or due to a specific characteristic such as having a mental illness or cancer. Stigma takes on 3 forms as described below. Number 1 is a public stigma, when members of a society endorse negative stereotype of people from another group and discriminate against them. Number 2 is label avoidance. In order to avoid being labeled as crazy or nuts, people needing care may avoid seeking it altogether or stop care once started. Last is self-stigma, when people from another group internalize the negative stereotypes and prejudice and in turn discriminate against themselves. So now we were going to proceed to the causes of prejudice and discrimination.
Good day everyone, I'm Johanna Mabaya. Now I'm going to report about the social identity theory and social identity theory asserts that people have a proclivity to categorize their social world into meaningfully specific representations of people. These representations are then organized as prototypes in the social organization process and lead us to a society to perceive similarities between our group and the difference between groups and peoples and themselves. So this behavior is generated such that the self is isolated to the Explain
誰かの声がする。誰かをずっと呼んでいる。日の光が少しずつ空気を
explain how we acquire and then subsequently became such conditions and emotional reactions to other groups that they could also account for why these people acts are repeated. Next is social observational
誰かの声がする。誰かをずっと呼んでいる。日の光が少しずつ空気を
According to
と呼んでいる。日の光が少しずつ空気を誰かの声がする。誰かをずっと呼んでいる。日の光が少しずつ空気を誰かの声がする。誰かをずっと呼んでいる。日の光が少しずつ空気を
Good day everyone, I'm Mohalidinis Magandang, PSCD2B. This intergroup rivalry is inevitable due to competition for limited resources. Another line of thinking those answer that groups will engage in prejudicial and discriminatory practices because they are competing resources. Realistic group theory. Campbell, 1970. Relative deprivation. In the case of former, groups competing for limited jobs may engage in discriminatory practices or make prejudicial comments about the other groups. Social dominance orientation. View their in-group as dominant and superior to out-groups and seek to enforce the hierarchy as it exists now. Authoritarian personality, which a person displays an exaggerated submission to authority. This intolerance of weakness endorses the use of punitive measures toward out-group members or deviant and conformity to the group leader. System justification theory processes that people are motivated to varying degrees and defend, foster, and justify existing social, political, and economic arrangement, also known as the status quo, to maintain their advantaged position. Attribution theory asserts that people are motivated to explain their own and other people's behavior by attributing causes of either something in themselves or a trait they have, dispositional attribution, or to something outside the person called a situation attribution. Fundamental attribution, which is error in assigning cause to another behavior in which we automatically assume a dispositional reason on his or her action and ignore situation action. Attributional ambiguity refers to the confusion a person may experience over whether or not they are being treated prejudicially. Tracker and Major, 1989. Though no one would want to be discriminated, agent, or experience prejudice, knowing this is the cause of negative feedback can actually protect oneself.
So, good day everyone. I will discuss to you about the teaching tolerance, which is the reducing, prejudice, and discrimination. So, let's talk about first the reducing. What is reducing means? Reducing is to make a smaller or less reduced expense. For example, of it, to make exchange to simpler from reduced fraction to lowest terms. So, let's proceed the prejudice. Prejudice is an assumption or an opinion about someone simply based on that person membership of or to a particular group. For example, people can be prejudiced against someone else of a different ethnicity, gender, or religion. So let's talk about that discrimination. What is the discrimination? Discrimination is the unfair or prejudicial treatment of a people groups based on their characteristics, such as gender. So let's go back to our main topic, is the teaching tolerance. Teaching tolerance is a starting point, one way to reduce prejudice and discrimination, which is the respect, acceptance, also the appreciation of the religion of the world. So we have a good purpose principle to improve the intergroup relation. So principle number 1, source of prejudice and discrimination should be addressed at the institutional and individual group level and where people learn, work, and live. So principle number 2, we have to go beyond merely raising knowledge and awareness to include efforts to influence behavior and other strategy. Principle number 3, strategy should be include all racial and ethnic groups involved as diversity provides an opportunity of learning and for comparison that can help for Principle number 4, there should be cooperate equal status rules for persons from different groups. So number 5, people in position of power should be participate. So sinasabi dito sa isang komunidad, you have to participate group activity. For example, yung paglilinis, feeding session. Principle number 6, positive intergroup relation should be taught children at an easily age but same time. So, principle number 7, similarities between racial and ethnic groups need to be emphasized as much as different in social class. So that's all.
The intergroup contact theory. In 1950s, psychologist Gordon Allport developed the contact hypothesis. The contact hypothesis states that increasing the interaction between groups that in conflict can reduce prejudice. And this is known as intergroup contact, when individuals engage with people from another group, which can reduce the fear of unfamiliar culture and challenge misconceptions. And that's why the potential of intergroup contact to be a potential applied, and it means to improving the intergroup relationship. And the next topic is all about the jigsaw classroom. The jigsaw classroom was created by Elliot Aronson, a social psychologist from University of Texas in Austin. And he is a student developed jigsaw method in 1970. And it is a research-based cooperative learning, while originally it was developed for a K-12 system, and it is now being used for schooling. And now, how jigsaw classroom works. First, divide the classroom into a small groups of equal size, 5 to 6. Second is each student works independently on their material before combining them in expert groups to put together their understanding and devise strategies on how to teach the material on their original groups. And the advantage of jigsaw classroom, such as promote independence and encourage cooperation, not competition, and it helps students develop skill on self-teaching and teaching others.